These Ipswich Town players are defying the odds.
Welcome back to TWTV, where you join us in the East End at the London Stadium, where we're looking back on West Ham United 4, Ipswich Town 1, and I'm joined by TWTD staff writers Phil Ham and Kallum Brisset. Welcome, guys. Bit of a sombre mood today, perhaps, but let's get into it. So, a game where I think we had a lot of perhaps positivity after the Villa performance. We know their manager was under a bit of pressure. But Phil, it didn't quite work out as we'd hoped. Go for it. Give us an overview of the game, please.
No, it didn't. It didn't. As you say, we went into the game very positive because of the result last week. And actually, this is probably the one game so far since we've been promoted that we've come out feeling a bit deflated and a bit disappointed. I know we lost to Liverpool and we lost to Manchester City, but they were Liverpool and Manchester City. The other results, 4 draws in a row, good solid basis on which to build. Today, as you say, is a game that we kind of looked at as one that we could potentially win, get our first win. But yeah, it was, the positives to take from it, I think, one, we conceded after 48 or 49 seconds. There was some dispute about whether it was 48 or 49 in the press room. And then we showed our spirit to come back into it and get another good goal through Liam Delap. But I think from there, really, we gave the ball away too much. We made too many errors at the back. When we had opportunities, we didn't take them. Because if you look across the game, there were a few chances that we had. I know one of them was Smodic right at the end, which he probably will feel that he should have scored. Jacob Greaves had a header that he will feel that he should have hit the target. Delap had an opportunity in the second half that Areola saved really well.
Yeah, that was good.
But again, we've said this kind of across a number of games that, and Kieran's alluded to it really, that we've not been clinical enough. Whereas opposition sides, when we've made mistakes, have been very clinical, and I think we saw that today when we allowed or afforded West Ham opportunities.
Yeah, and actually, Kallum, let's get your overview of the game. For me, Kallum, a lot of turnovers today. We were giving the ball away a lot and in dangerous areas, and also you saw the quality of West Ham as well. Like in every position, there was a good player, and we were getting tackled and losing the ball. What's your overview to follow up on Phil's, please?
Yeah, I think we were giving the ball away in our own half quite a lot. Their high press was catching us possibly by surprise a little bit, and then, like you say, the talent they had, I thought Jarrod Bowen in particular was outstanding, and then kind of all their attacking players all sort of got themselves on the score sheet, didn't they? Kudu scored, Paqueta scored, Antonio was the one who scored early. But like Phil said, it was a good response, after going behind inside the first minute to come back with another goal from Liam Delap, which is obviously a good story for him. He's on to 4 now for the season. And I thought the first half was quite even, and I put this to Wes Burns after the game. We were talking about how we were kind of weathering the storm towards the end of the first half, and I felt had we got to the break at 1-1, it could have ended up being a different story. But conceding just before half time, I think, possibly took the stuffing out of it. And then to concede so early in the second half, it was pretty smooth sailing from there. And West Ham ended up being really comfortable for them.
Absolutely. Over to you, Phil.
Yeah, Kieran McKenna made a very similar point about if half time had come at the 30-minute or 35-minute mark, then it was a fairly competitive game. And that we'd come out and sort of pushed on from there. But I think they had that sort of spell just before half time when they had 1 or 2 opportunities before the goal that they scored, and that sort of changed it really. And then again the goal just after the break. The other thing that he mentioned was Antonio, and actually he thought that one of the key things was that they were very direct. More direct than other teams, and we didn't deal with that, which is interesting, really, I suppose. That, but then once they'd got ahead once it was sort of 3-1, 4-1, then they started to show their quality from there and just sort of passed
Do you
the game
think
out.
were we a bit open? Do you think we seemed to be trying to attack more than if you compare it to the Brighton game where we sat quite deep? We seemed to be quite open. We're obviously getting hurt on the wings. Do you think McKenna had come in with a bit more of an attacking game plan today than we expected?
I think probably more than the Brighton game, probably, and more than Liverpool, and more than well, actually we're quite attacking against Liverpool, weren't we? More than City, say. But yes, and which obviously allowed West Ham to kind of. To kind of get in behind us, and I mean, you look at the goals. I mean, the errors for quite a number of them, but the third one, I think, with the goalkeeper making the poor touch, and then Bowen being allowed to run in on goal unchallenged, and very poor goals. I think they'll kind of look back on those and think they should have really done a lot better. Yeah,
I mean. Let's before we get into sort of looking at the lineup and individual performances, Kallum, what do we think of the ground? I mean, I spoke to a lot of West Ham fans today, and it's a strange one. I mean, the Ipswich fans are split quite in half. It's obviously an old athletic stadium. Two things that struck out for me: there's a big gap between the upper tier and the middle tier, so there must be a hell of a view or poor view, and also the atmosphere for me was poor. I mean. This is what a bit of a theme we're seeing in the Premier League, isn't it? After their second goal, there was no noise from the West Ham fans. How did the atmosphere come across in the press box, and what did you think of the ground, Kallum?
Like you say, that you are so far from the pitch, and that's the problem with the old athletics, Jack. I was saying to Phil during the game, it's a good venue for sort of sport, but it just isn't a football ground in that sort of traditional sense. And West Ham fans echo that. I know the vast majority of them, miss Upton Park and think it was possibly a poor move to come here. But I didn't think the atmosphere was particularly great, but
maybe a theme in the Premier League, I don't know.
Possibly,
but I mean, Phil, I'm sure
maybe we're privileged with Portman Road. It's one of those sort of old school grounds.
We're kind of used to it, maybe in the Championship. I remember going to Upton Park, Phil, for one of Paul Jewell's better performances. I think a 1-0 win, and it was absolutely rocking down there. An interesting ground. I'm not sure it's something that really struck me as a great football ground, as Kallum said.
Yeah, I think Upton Park was a stark contrast really to here, because it was really tight to the pitch and a lot of noise.
And you felt like you were in the East End as well, rather than being in a former Olympic Park shopping centre as well. It
did remind me, we said this before the match, that it reminded me of the Luzhniki in Moscow, which obviously was another Olympic stadium that we played at, and because that distance you are from the pitch, although there weren't 1,500 Russian police on the pitch on the running track this time.
So let's before we ask Kallum to go through the lineup, can we get any more key moments for you, Phil? Because for me, I think it was just those errors, weren't they? Edge of the box, giving the ball away. What other moments? I mean, to be honest, they could have scored 2 more in the first half. We were very lucky, weren't we, a couple of times. What other key moments in the game you think swung it for them?
Well, I think the turning point was getting a goal before half-time, because I think if it had been 1-1 at half-time, we'd probably have gone in, rearranged things a little bit, and we'd had a bit more of an opportunity to get something out of the game, be more competitive, and then of course conceding a third 4 minutes into the second half, that obviously wasn't ideal. The other thing, of course, is Axel Tuanzebe being missing. That's another sort of factor. We certainly missed him, and unfortunately he's going to be out for what Kieran referred to as a little while, because they're not actually sure yet quite how long, because he's had surgery on a hand injury. So I think those are sort of key factors, and then as I say, kind of opportunities that we Delap's opportunity that was well saved, that was at 3-1, wasn't it? If that had gone to 3-2, then maybe the game might have got a bit more. We might have been able to take the game more to West Ham, although I think that's kind of clutching at straws to some degree, but you never know.
We tried in the second half, didn't we? But it was,
huffing and puffing.
Huffing and puffing is the right word. Callum, let's go over to the team. Phil's already mentioned the change to Axel, which I think, for me, when I saw on the team sheet, I was worried about that, to be honest. Just take us through the team, lineup, and then we'll move on to the performances, if that's okay.
Yeah, so it was obviously Muric in goal, which we've come to expect. The back four, the usual crew in the centre half, O'Shea and Greaves, and then Davis on the left. Touched on Axel missing on the right. It was Ben Johnson. We'll talk about his performance in a moment. Phillips and Morsey in midfield, which again we've come to expect. And then it was Jack Clark was given the nod again ahead of Schmodix, Hutchinson in the 10, and Burns came in for Ogbenny behind Delap. Sorry. But yeah, moving on to performances, I think Axel's a big miss for me. He's been one of our best players this season, and I think we really did miss him today. Ben Johnson possibly coming with a point to prove back at his old his old stomping ground, I'm not sure he had his best afternoon.
Yeah, initially he was out of position again at the start of the game. If you remember, he was too far upfield. But just in general, he just seemed to be rushed quite a lot, didn't he? And there were errors in there. It wasn't a very polished performance from him at all, was it? He seemed to be struggling a little bit. And I wonder about Phillips as well, Kallum, because obviously there's a lot of noise around Phillips coming back. He didn't have a good time playing here. But again, he was in some errors at the start. Thought he got better, but talk us through Phillips as well.
Yeah, I thought the two ex-West Ham boys, I thought, were possibly two of the worst performances for Town today, which is a big shame. Like you say with Johnson, I think his defensive positioning, I don't think has been that great all season, really. And for the third goal, it was a kind of a catalogue of errors. It was Johnson's back pass, which he lobbed over to Muric, put him under so much pressure. Muric made the poor touch. Yeah. And then when Bowen gets the ball, he's still got a lot of work to do. Does very well, but I think he gets past Calvin Phillips way too easy for me before finding the bottom corner. So
a catalogue of errors, you're absolutely right. And the back pass, I mean, you just you're like blasting it high in the air and expecting control. You just don't do that.
You don't lob it back to your own goal.
And again, I think this is the thing is we keep saying welcome to the Premier League. We say this every week. You just can't make errors like this.
No.
We're not going to get anything on the road with these kind of errors all over the performance.
Wes Burns was asked about that, whether those sorts of errors they might not have been punished in the Championship last season. He completely denied that. He was like, they're bad errors and they're going to get punished at any level. And I just think that they're the sort of things that we need to stamp out going forwards, because if you make those errors, not only should you expect to be punished, but at this level you will be punished.
Who you think, going back to you, Phil, who do you think stood out? Who thought you played well? I thought Davis was good at times. Was it Delap goal? Who was the better performance for us? Who stood out from a Town perspective? Or was it anyone?
Well, it's not. Yes, it's always difficult to kind of pick out top performers when you've lost 4-1, isn't it? Delap's goal, I think that showed the confidence he'd got at the moment. But other than that, and actually, I thought the way he nearly took that other chance was very good as well. It was obviously well saved. I still think there are a lot of players that are finding their feet in the Premier League. The players that have come up. And as Kieran has said in sort of every press conference, really, we will get better as players are integrated into the squad. And he was saying in the pre-match press conference how much he's relishing having the extra time on the training field to work with them. So I think it's not a surprise that players are settling in. I think the big thing today was really that that there were too many mistakes, whereas we've kind of cut those out in previous games and maybe rode our luck on occasions. The goalkeepers then made a good save when required, and today that didn't happen. We made too many mistakes, and perhaps we put him in situations where he couldn't get us out of the fire. But we're going to have days like that, aren't we? We have days like that when we had a really good season when we came up to the Premier League 20 years ago.
And he's getting on the train, because one of the training pictures where he's going to have a lot of video to re-watch and look back on and sort of think about mistakes and see what.
Over time, analysis.
I think what I'm saying is it's going to be a learning game, that one. They'll learn a lot of lessons. Okay, just conscious of time, moving on. In terms of the Premier Survival League, and you know what, after the Aston Villa superb performance, I was thinking we're going to be fine, and now you suddenly feel like we are in a survival league. Let's look at what happened around us. Palace lost again. It's really not a good start to them. At home to Liverpool, but Liverpool are strong. They lost 1-0 to Liverpool at home. Arsenal beat Southampton 3-1. Again, a good result for us. Quite a game at Brentford, where we'll be fairly soon, where they beat Wolves 5-3, so Wolves' poor start continues. And Everton are 0-0 with Newcastle the last time I looked, and are just sort of nudged above us, but if they lose, they'll go below. So we're in 17th place. We go into another international break, and we're not in the relegation 3, so that's a positive. Let's look ahead. So we've got a break, a lot of players going away. Everton becomes important now. What's your thoughts?
Well, I think we've kind of looked on Everton for a few weeks as a winnable game, haven't we? But then they're not in terrible form, are they? I think they've had sort of decent result last time out. But if we're going to survive, games like Everton and teams that are in a similar sort of area of the table as us are games that we need to be winning. So I'm sure that's kind of the players know that, and the management know that.
And I think McKenna will want to get that first win now, Kallum. Because it's going to be a massive boost for the club and the fan base.
I think psychologically getting that monkey off your back is so important, and without meaning to overplay it, I think this Everton game is quite crucial, because you look at the bottom three. If you say that the other two that we've come up with we're going to definitely be fighting against, you're kind of looking at one or two others who you need to be fighting with, and Everton are one of those names that you'd say. So a home game against them is a big chance to get a victory. It won't be easy. Everton have some fantastic players, such an established Premier League side. But yeah, it does already at this stage of the season, particularly with us not getting that first win yet. Feels like it could be quite an important
Well,
game.
listen, thanks very much, guys. Not the happiest of times in the East End, but we're going to learn a lot of lessons from this in what was an interesting ground to play football in. But we look forward to seeing you again after the Everton game. And thanks very much for watching. Please like and subscribe.